My family demanded I drain my savings for my golden child brother. I said nothing, until the CEO buying my company crashed our family BBQ. My parents secretly orchestrated a public family tribunal to humiliate me into paying my golden child brother's $12,500 debt, threatening to kick me out if I refused. They thought they were backing a helpless, mid-level IT worker into a corner, completely unaware that the family friend I brought to the party was actually a CEO finalizing the $8.5 million acquisition of my tech startup. I'm Caleb, 25 years old. The air in our living room was thick with the suffocating smell of my mother Diane's famous pot roast and the absolute stench of cheap hypocrisy. It was a Tuesday evening, just days before our annual neighborhood summer barbecue, an event my parents, Arthur and Diane, threw every single year just to showcase their perfect family to relatives and neighbors. Laughter usually echoed from the backyard during these warm months, but inside, here in the heart of the house, a storm was brewing that had been 20 years in the making. My father stood before me, his face a mask of stern disappointment, his shoulders squared like a judge about to pass a life sentence. My mother was beside him, dabbing at eyes that weren't actually crying, playing the role of the distressed matriarch perfectly. And my younger brother, Mason, 22, the source of all this misery, stood slightly behind them, a smug little smirk playing on his lips. Caleb, my father's voice boomed, loud enough that if the windows had been open, the entire street would have heard him. Your mother and I have been more than patient. Mason made a mistake. A small business venture that didn't work out. It's a $12,500 debt. A simple mistake. That's what we are calling it. I mentally scoffed. A mistake. That's what they called it. I called it funding a lifestyle of VIP club tables, bottle service, and expensive designer streetwear with credit card money he didn't actually have. Family helps family. My mother added, her voice trembling with practiced fragility, stepping forward to place a delicate hand on my father's arm. You have a good, stable job in computers. It's your duty to help your brother get back on his feet. He just needs a little push. I stayed silent, my gaze fixed on a small, jagged crack in the drywall just over my father's left shoulder. I had watched that crack spread for years, tracing its path during countless lectures, watching it grow just like the fractures in our family. My absolute silence seemed to enrage him. The vein in his neck began to pulse. Are you listening to me? He snapped, taking a threatening step forward. We are giving you a choice, Caleb. You will transfer the money to Mason's account by the end of the week, or you will pack your bags and find somewhere else to live. We will not harbor an ungrateful, selfish son under our roof. The room fell completely silent. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly sounded like a jet engine. Every eye was on me. Mason looked triumphant. He had won, as he always did. My father crossed his arms, a final, non-negotiable gesture that he used to end every argument since I was a child. Well, what's it going to be? I slowly raised my eyes from the crack in the wall and looked at him, then at my mother, then at Mason. I didn't say a single word. I just let the silence stretch, letting their toxic ultimatum hang in the air like poison gas. To understand my silence in that moment, to understand why I didn't break down crying or explode in a fit of screaming anger, you have to know that this wasn't the first time I was made the sacrificial lamb for my family's golden child. It was just going to be the last. My role as the family's invisible support system started incredibly early. I was 12 years old when my mother sat me down at the kitchen table and informed me that I was old enough to pay for my own school lunches. We're not made of money, Caleb. You need to learn responsibility. She'd sighed, while simultaneously signing a permission slip for a 10-year-old Mason to go on an out-of-state school ski trip that cost well over $250. So, I learned the value of $1. I started with a grueling paper route, waking up at 4:30 a.m. every single morning, 7 days a week. My fingers would go completely numb from the biting winter cold as I folded newspapers on the icy porch, my breath pluming in the dark air. That money went straight to the school cafeteria and then to my own school supplies. I vividly remember being 13 and standing in the stationery aisle at the local superstore, carefully calculating if I could afford the durable, name-brand binders, or if I had to settle for the flimsy cardboard ones that would inevitably fall apart by November. Meanwhile, Mason would come home with a brand new video game console, a gift from our dad just for getting a B- on a basic middle school science project. My first real job was at 14, bagging groceries at the local supermarket. The work was mind-numbing, standing on hard linoleum floors for hours, but the paycheck was a genuine lifeline. It bought me clothes not the trendy, expensive streetwear brands Mason flaunted, but clean, unbranded shirts and stiff jeans from the discount outlet. I'll never forget the sting of my mother's words when she saw me in a new pair of jeans I'd proudly bought myself after saving for 3 weeks. Couldn't you find something better? It's a little embarrassing, she murmured, her nose wrinkled in distaste, right before handing Mason a crisp $100 bill for a weekend trip to the city with his friends. There was never any acknowledgement that the only reason I wore those clothes was because they flat out refused to provide for me. The double standard was always clearest during meal times. Family dinners were a theatrical performance. My parents would cook lavish meals, but my portion was always noticeably smaller. Or I was told to make myself a peanut butter sandwich because there wasn't quite enough of the roast to go around. Yet, if Mason wanted a second or third helping, the platter was practically shoved his way with a beaming, adoring smile. On Fridays, they would order gourmet pizza or expensive sushi, a treat for themselves and their hardworking son, Mason. I would be locked in my room, the delicious smells wafting maliciously under my door, eating a 90-cent bowl of instant ramen I'd bought with my own grocery store wages. The message was loud and clear: my needs were an inconvenience, his desires were an absolute priority. One Christmas when I was 16, the disparity was laid bare for everyone to see. Mason, who had been begging for a new gaming setup, unwrapped a top-of-the-line PC rig worth over $1,500. He screamed in excitement, hugging my parents. My present from them? A $75 gift card to a generic department store. I forced a smile, swallowed the massive lump in my throat, and said thank you. But the hollowness in my chest was suffocating. Later that day, I overheard my father boasting to my Uncle Vance in the kitchen. We have to support Mason's passion. He has the reflexes. He could be an esports professional one day. You have to invest in your kids' dreams. My passion was coding, something I did on a battered, second-hand laptop I had saved up for 8 months to buy from a pawn shop. They never once asked to see a single project I had built. They didn't even know what language I was programming in. To them, it was a distraction, a waste of electricity. It wasn't a passion because it didn't come with a flashy price tag they could show off to the neighbors. That was the exact year I stopped expecting anything from them. It was easier to rely entirely on myself than to nurse the constant, agonizing ache of disappointment. My earnings, my efforts, my dreams, they were mine and mine alone, completely invisible to the very people who were supposed to see me most clearly. College was my escape. Not a physical one, since I couldn't afford the exorbitant dorm fees and had to commute an hour each way from home, but it was an intellectual and emotional refuge. It was there, in a stuffy, neon-lit computer lab smelling of ozone, hot dust, and stale coffee, that I met Eli. He was brilliant, funny, and had a restless, manic energy that perfectly matched my own quiet intensity. We were paired up for an advanced algorithms project, and within an hour, we were finishing each other's sentences, our coding styles syncing up in a way that felt almost telepathic. Eli was the first person who truly saw me. Not the quiet, overshadowed, neglected son, but the builder, the architect. He'd look at a piece of my code and his eyes would light up with genuine awe. "Dude, this architecture is insane. How did you even conceptualize this?" He'd say, shaking his head. For someone completely used to his absolute best efforts being met with cold indifference, his praise was like water in a scorching desert. He came from a radically different kind of family, one that was loud, messy, but full of overwhelming warmth. The first time I had dinner at his house, his mom piled my plate impossibly high with lasagna, and his dad asked me a dozen questions about my major, genuinely interested in my answers. It felt so foreign, so deeply normal. I saw what I had been missing my entire life, and it both hurt profoundly and gave me an incredible sense of hope. Eli's dusty, disorganized garage became our sanctuary. After my classes and my part-time job at a local phone repair shop, I'd drive straight there. We'd spend hours huddled over our glowing laptops, wrapped in blankets during the winter, fueled by cheap energy drinks, generic pizza, and a massive shared dream. We were building something. An AI-driven logistics and workflow tool that we believed could completely revolutionize how mid-sized tech firms manage their internal operations. We called it NexusFlow AI. It was our secret, our absolute obsession. While my family saw me coming home late, exhausted, with dark circles under my eyes, and assumed I was just wasting my life, Eli and I were building an empire, line by painstaking line of code. He was the visionary, the big picture guy who could sell ice to an Eskimo. I was the architect, the one who built the intricate, flawless systems that made his grand vision a functioning reality. The only family member who ever seemed to believe in me was my grandmother, my dad's mom. She lived 3 states away, but she would call every single Sunday at 4 p.m. sharp. She never pried, but she had a way of listening that made you feel completely heard. I told her about my classes, about Eli, but never about my miserable family life. I didn't have to. I think she always knew. Before she passed away, she sent me a letter. Inside was a check for $750 and a short note written in her shaky, elegant cursive. "Caleb, your grandfather and I always saw the quiet fire in you. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small. This isn't much, but use it for your dreams. Make us proud." That $750 became the literal seed money for NexusFlow AI. We used it to buy vital server space and a few crucial software licenses we desperately needed to launch our beta. That letter, however, was priceless. I kept it taped to the concrete wall in Eli's garage workspace. On the nights when I was drowning in utter exhaustion and crushing self-doubt, when the cold indifference of my parents felt like a physical weight crushing my lungs, I would read her words. Don't ever let anyone make you feel small. It became my mantra. It was the absolute foundation on which I built not just our company, but myself. The catalyst for the final, explosive storm came, as it always did, from Mason. After dropping out of his second attempt at community college claiming the professors were stifling his creativity, he decided he was going to be an entrepreneur. My parents, completely blinded by their obsessive favoritism, thought it was a brilliant, brave idea. They gave him a few $1,000s as a business loan for what he called a premium luxury watch resale venture. In reality, he was buying hyped-up timepieces on high-interest credit cards, completely failing to sell them for a profit because he didn't understand the market, and using the remaining cash to fund a lifestyle of VIP club tables, expensive dinners, and weekend beach trips that he plastered all over his social media. The inevitable, catastrophic crash came swiftly. One of his sketchy suppliers called the house, threatening legal action over a massive unpaid invoice. The credit card bills piled up, demanding minimum payments he couldn't meet. The grand total of his business mistake was a little over $12,500. He confessed to our parents in the kitchen, crying real tears, framing himself as a tragic victim of a volatile global market and malicious competitors. They, of course, bought his ridiculous story completely. Around the exact same time, something else was happening. NexusFlow AI was finally getting noticed. We had entered and won a regional tech incubator competition, which came with a small grant and a little bit of media coverage. The article was buried on page 8 of the local business journal, but someone saw it. Jason. He was a guy I grew up with. Someone I'd considered a decent friend. We'd reconnected a few months prior, and I had helped him out with a small $200 loan when he was in a tight spot with his rent. He called me after seeing the article. Hey man, saw that piece on your company. Sounds like you're absolutely killing it. You must be rolling in it, bro. I laughed it off, exhausted from a 1-4-hour coding sprint. It's a startup, man, we're mostly running on caffeine and blind hope right now. We are a long way from rolling in it. I was being completely honest. We were aggressively reinvesting every single penny back into the business. My personal checking account was barely hovering in the low 4 figures, but Jason heard exactly what he wanted to hear. He saw the words AI, award-winning, and founder, and his brain translated it to secret millionaire. And in a pathetic effort to ingratiate himself with my parents, he mentioned it to my father the next time he saw him at the local hardware store. You must be so incredibly proud of Caleb, Jason had said. I hear his tech company is the next big thing. He's probably pulling down a massive corporate salary. That was the spark that lit the dynamite. My parents, already panicking and losing sleep about Mason's mounting $12,500 debt, suddenly had a magical solution presented to them on a silver platter. Their forgotten, neglected son, the one they never invested a single dime in, was supposedly a secret financial success. In their twisted minds, my money wasn't mine. It was family money. It was the perfect solution to their Mason problem. The final piece of the trap was set by my Aunt Beatrice, my mother's older sister. During one of their daily, gossipy phone calls, my mother tearfully confessed the dire situation with Mason's debt. Aunt Beatrice, a grandmaster of passive aggression, said something that sealed my fate. Oh, Diane, that's just terrible. But, I'm sure Caleb would be more than happy to help. That's what a good son does. My boy just put a down payment on a new car for us. It's so wonderful when your children can finally give back. I'm sure Caleb, with his successful new computer company, feels the exact same way. The comparison, the implied judgment, the painting of me as a potential deadbeat monster if I refused to bail out my brother, it was the perfect psychological manipulation. When my mother hung up the phone, the idea had solidified into concrete. It wasn't a request for help anymore. It was an absolute expectation. A demand. My supposed success had just become my curse. The week before the annual neighborhood barbecue was when they finally made their move. They cornered me in the living room, the same room where the public execution would later be attempted. The TV was completely off, which was the first glaring sign of trouble. My father never, ever missed the evening news. Caleb, sit down, he commanded, pointing to the armchair opposite the sofa where he and my mother sat like a tribunal. Mason was nowhere to be seen, which I knew was intentional. They wanted to handle this delicate matter first before bringing him in. I remained standing, crossing my arms. I'm fine here. What's going on? My mother started, her voice laced with a rehearsed, sickening sweetness that immediately set my teeth on edge. Honey, we know you've been working so incredibly hard on your little computer project. It's a company, Mom, not a project. She waved a dismissive, manicured hand. Whatever it is, we're very proud of you. We heard from Jason that you're doing very, very well for yourself. The pieces instantly clicked into place. Jason. Of course. Jason doesn't know what he's talking about, I said flatly. We're a startup. There's no big salary. Every dime goes back into the servers. My father scoffed loudly, leaning forward, his face hardening. Don't lie to us, Caleb. We're your parents. We know you've always been extremely responsible with your money. You've got a nest egg hidden away. Meanwhile, your brother, your own flesh and blood, is in deep trouble. Mason got himself into trouble, I stated, my voice dropping to a dangerously calm register. He spent money he didn't have on luxury things he didn't need to impress people who don't care about him. He had a dream. My mother cried out, clutching her chest as if Mason were a martyred artist instead of a failed sneaker and watch reseller. You of all people should understand that. We supported your little computer hobby all these years. The sheer audacity of that statement almost made me burst into hysterical laughter. Supported me? They had actively ignored me. They had forced me to support myself since I was a literal child. The only support they ever gave was the physical roof over my head, something they held over me like a guillotine blade every time I stepped out of line. So, this is what this is about, I said, finally connecting all the dots. Mason's $12,500 debt, you want me to pay it? It's the right thing to do. My father said, his tone shifting from fake parental concern to a cold, hard, authoritative demand. We gave you life. We fed you, we clothed you. We've given you a home even now, as a grown man, don't you think you owe us? Don't you think you owe your brother? Every single sacrifice I had ever made flashed before my eyes in rapid succession. The missed high school parties because I was working. The worn out, hole-filled shoes I wore through 3 winters. The lonely quiet dinners of instant ramen while they laughed over steak. I had been paying my own way for over a decade. The debt I supposedly owed them was a total fiction they had created to justify their own colossal failures as parents. A lifetime of suppressed, toxic anger began to bubble up inside me, hot and clarifying. For the first time in my entire existence, I didn't feel the desperate need to defend myself or explain my finances. I just felt completely, utterly done. I looked my father straight in the eye. No. The word, quiet and absolute, hung in the air between us like a physical object. His face turned a dark, furious shade of plum red. What did you just say to me? I said no, I repeated, my voice much stronger this time, echoing off the walls. This is Mason's debt, not mine. I am not paying a single cent of it. Letter. My mother gasped dramatically, tears springing to her eyes. Caleb, how can you be so selfish, so incredibly cruel, after everything we've done for you? What have you done? I asked, the question entirely genuine. What have you actually done for me? You taught me to be self-sufficient by abandoning me emotionally. You taught me the value of $1 by making me earn every single one I ever had while you handed Mason everything on a silver platter. And now you want to take my hard-earned dollars for the son you actually care about. The answer is no. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, leaving them sputtering in stunned, furious silence. I walked up the stairs, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. I knew it wasn't over. I had just declared thermonuclear war. Update 1. My defiance did not inspire any self-reflection. It inspired pure, unadulterated rage. The very next day, the atmosphere in the house turned from icy to venomous. They communicated entirely through aggressively slammed doors, violently clattering dishes, and passive-aggressive comments muttered just loud enough for me to hear from the hallway. Some children just have absolutely no gratitude. My mother would sigh dramatically on the phone to her friends. Can you believe the selfishness of this generation? I knew they were planning something. My parents, especially my father, possessed egos as fragile as spun glass. They could not stand having their supreme authority challenged. Losing control, especially in front of me, was an intolerable, unforgivable offense. Their solution, as always, was to escalate the situation until I broke. If private pressure didn't work, public humiliation was the next logical step in their playbook. The annual neighborhood barbecue, now less than a week away, was the absolute perfect venue. I discovered the full extent of their deranged plan completely by accident. I was heading to the basement laundry room to grab my work shirts when I heard my mother's voice coming from the kitchen, sharp and conspiratorial. I paused at the top of the stairs, holding my breath, pressing my ear against the cracked door. She was on the phone with Aunt Beatrice. And he just said no. Flat out, no, right to our faces, my mother was saying, her voice dripping with venomous indignation. Arthur is absolutely furious. He says if Caleb wants to act like he's not part of this family, we'll show him exactly what that means. Aunt Beatrice's voice was a faint, tinny murmur on the other end, but I could guess her response was a goading agreement. Arthur's idea is brilliant, actually, my mother continued, her tone shifting to one of gleeful, malicious strategy. We'll do it at the barbecue on Saturday. In front of everyone. Uncle Vance will be there, all the cousins, the neighbors. Arthur is going to make a speech. We'll tell them the whole story. How poor Mason is struggling so hard, and how his wealthy, arrogant brother refuses to lift a single finger to help. We'll give him the ultimatum right there in front of the crowd. Either he helps his family, or he's out of the house. What can he do? He won't want to look like a monster in front of the whole family. He'll crumble. He'll have to give in. My blood ran absolutely cold. It wasn't just a threat anymore. It was a staged performance, a theatrical execution of my character. They were going to stage my public shaming, banking entirely on my deep-seated fear of judgment from the extended family. They would paint me as a cartoon villain, a cold-hearted, greedy miser who would rather see his beloved brother suffer and go bankrupt than part with his precious money. And the sickest part was, they were going to enjoy every second of it. Mason, I had no doubt, was fully in on the plan. He would play the role of the tragic, humbled victim perfectly. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding so hard I thought my ribs would crack. For a brief, terrifying moment, all I felt was a crushing sense of total defeat. How could I possibly fight this? They were my parents. The narrative they spun would be believed by everyone. I was always the quiet one. They were the loud, charismatic hosts. I grabbed my keys, practically ran to my car, and drove straight to Eli's garage, my mind racing a million miles a minute. Eli took one look at my pale, sweating face and knew something was catastrophically wrong. What happened? He asked, pushing his laptop away. I told him everything. The demand, my refusal, the insane conversation I had just overheard. I expected him to be furiously angry on my behalf, to tell me my parents were absolute monsters. He was, and he did. But then he leaned back in his squeaky office chair, and a slow, highly calculating smile began to spread across his face. It was the same smile he got when he figured out a massive shortcut in our code. So, he said, tapping a pen against his chin, they're building a grand stage to humiliate you. Yeah, I said grimly, rubbing my temples. And they're inviting the whole damn town. Well, you know what they say, Eli said, his eyes practically gleaming with mischief. Never waste a good stage. A new, audacious idea began to form in my mind. An idea so incredibly risky and so utterly terrifying that it just might work. The seed of an idea Eli had planted grew into a full-blown, military-grade strategy over the next 2 hours. My parents wanted to use the party as their stage. Fine, I would use it as mine. They were bringing a hostile audience, I would bring a star witness. There was only one person on planet Earth who could detonate their false narrative so completely, so totally, that there would be absolutely no recovery. Mr. Sterling. Marcus Sterling was the formidable CEO of Apex Systems, a massive, multinational software development firm. For the past 3 agonizing months, Eli and I had been in intense, highly confidential, closed-door negotiations with him and his team of corporate lawyers. Apex wanted to acquire NexusFlow AI. They were completely blown away by the flawless architecture of our platform, and they saw its massive potential to integrate into their global logistics division. We had spent weeks going back and forth, hammering out the intricate details of a massive buyout. We were on the absolute verge of signing an agreement that would alter the trajectory of our lives forever. It was a life-altering sum of money. The kind of money my parents couldn't even begin to comprehend. The final signing meeting was scheduled for the Monday morning right after the barbecue. It's a crazy ask, I know, I said to Eli, pacing the concrete floor of the garage, kicking a stray power cord. He's a CEO of a billion-dollar company. He doesn't go to suburban family hot dog barbecues. He'll think I'm insane. He might pull the deal. The worst he can say is no, Eli reasoned, pulling up Mr. Sterling's contact card. But Caleb, think about it. The deal is basically done. The lawyers have blessed it. We like him. He likes us. He deeply respects you. He might just do it to protect his investment. My heart was hammering against my ribs. It was the boldest, most aggressive move I had ever considered in my entire life. It felt both completely insane and perfectly logical. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone, dialed his private number, and held my breath. Mr. Sterling, it's Caleb, I said, trying desperately to keep my voice steady. Caleb, good to hear from you. Everything all right? Getting nervous before the big day on Monday? His deep, authoritative voice boomed through the phone, friendly but direct. Everything's perfect with the deal, sir. Actually, I have a personal, and somewhat highly unusual, request. I took a massive breath, and laid it all out. I didn't give him the entire sordid 20-year family history, but I gave him the vital essentials. The long-standing toxic family dynamic, the sudden massive debt, the ultimatum, and their insane plan to publicly shame me at the party on Saturday. And then I made my pitch. They believe I'm an ungrateful son with a moderately successful IT job who is hoarding his small savings, I explained, gripping the edge of Eli's desk. They plan to use intense family pressure to force me to pay a debt that isn't mine. Your presence, and a simple, truthful announcement of what I actually do, would destroy that narrative instantly. There was a long, agonizing pause on the other end of the line. The silence stretched for so long I thought the call had dropped. I thought I had massively overstepped, that I had sounded crazy and unprofessional, and that he was going to cancel the $8.5 million deal right then and there. I was opening my mouth to apologize when I heard him let out a low, rumbling chuckle. Caleb, he said, and I could hear the genuine amusement in his voice. In my 30 years in this cutthroat business, I've seen a lot of vicious sharks in the boardroom. Sounds like you've been dealing with them at your own dinner table. I've always believed that a man's character is just as important as his code. He paused again. I like your boldness, kid. It's the exact same quality that made me want to buy your company. Send me the address. I'll clear my Saturday schedule. I wouldn't miss this for the absolute world. When I hung up the phone, I was trembling violently, but it wasn't from fear. It was from pure, unadulterated adrenaline. The game had completely changed. My parents were setting a trap, completely unaware that I was about to walk into it holding a live grenade. In the days leading up to the party, I became a total ghost in my own home. I adopted a strategy of absolute, unbreakable neutrality. I went to my part-time job, came home, ate dinner in total silence if they were in the kitchen, and retreated to my room. I was polite, quiet, and completely unreadable. This, I quickly realized, was far more unsettling for them than any screaming argument would have been. My silence was a vacuum, and they rushed to fill it with their own arrogant assumptions. They saw my quiet demeanor not as steely resolve, but as fear. They interpreted my lack of fight as a sign that I was weakening, that their psychological warfare was already working, and that on Saturday, I would crumble under the heavy weight of public opinion. During this time, I started to quietly prepare for my exit. In the dead of night, I packed not clothes, but memories. I went through old, dusty boxes in my closet, pulling out a few faded photos of me and my grandmother, my high school diploma, the small plastic in. I saw him. Mr. Sterling arrived, dressed in a casual but clearly expensive navy polo shirt and tailored slacks. He looked less like a ruthless corporate titan and more like a distinguished retiree enjoying his weekend. As planned, I intercepted him near the gate and casually introduced him to my Aunt Beatrice as a former mentor of mine from college. He blended in seamlessly, grabbing a plastic cup of iced tea and making incredibly charming small talk with my Uncle Vance about the current state of the stock market. Nobody gave him a second glance. My parents were in their absolute element, playing the roles of the gracious, perfect hosts to the hilt. My father was holding court by the massive stainless steel grill, laughing far too loudly at his own mediocre jokes, a beer in his hand. My mother was flitting between groups of women, refilling wine glasses, and collecting endless compliments on her landscaping. Mason was soaking up the attention near the patio, retelling the tragic sob story of his failed business to anyone who would listen, casting himself as a young, brilliant visionary who had been unfairly struck down by a stroke of cosmic bad luck. They were laying the heavy groundwork, perfectly seeding the narrative for the main event. Finally, around 3 p.m., my father clinked a pair of metal grilling tongs against his glass, calling for everyone's attention. A hush slowly fell over the crowded backyard. This was it, the execution. "Hey everyone," he began, a broad, benevolent, utterly fake smile plastered on his face. "Diane and I just want to thank you all for coming out today. It means the absolute world to us to have our family and friends here." He paused for dramatic effect, scanning the crowd. Family is the most important thing in this world. It's about being there for each other. In good times, and in bad. His eyes scanned the crowd and locked onto me, standing near the edge of the patio. The benevolent smile tightened into something significantly harder, colder, and recently, our family has faced some very bad times. As many of you know, our youngest son Mason here took a very brave risk to start his own business. He reached out, and put a proud, comforting arm around Mason's shoulders. Unfortunately, due to circumstances completely beyond his control, the market turned, and it didn't work out. It's left him in a very difficult, very scary financial position. Loud murmurs of sympathy rippled through the crowd. "Oh, poor Mason," Aunt Beatrice cooed audibly. Mason looked down at his expensive sneakers, the absolute picture of humility and disappointment. "But," my father continued, his voice rising in volume, taking on the cadence of a preacher, "the beautiful thing about family is that we lift each other up, we all pitch in, and we have been so incredibly proud of our other son, Caleb." He pointed a thick finger directly at me. The spotlight was officially on. "He's done very well for himself with his little tech job. A real promotion, a great new salary. He is in a prime position to help his brother, to lift him up, to do the right, honorable thing." The air in the backyard grew impossibly thick with expectation. I could feel 40 pairs of eyes heavily on me. They weren't just watching, they were actively judging. My mother stepped forward, her voice quivering with a masterful, Oscar-worthy performance of sorrow. "But for some reason, Caleb has refused. He flat out refuses to help his own flesh and blood." A collective, highly audible gasp went through the older aunts. Aunt Beatrice shot me a look of pure, venomous disgust. Whispers broke out instantly. "Selfish, how could he? Poor Diane." My father took a heavy step toward me, his face a terrifying mask of righteous, unyielding authority. "So we're doing this right now, in front of the family that loves and supports you. We are asking you one last time, Caleb. Will you pay Mason's debt and do your basic duty as a son and a brother? Or will you turn your back on this family for good? Because you cannot have it both ways. Either you're with us, or you're out. And if you're out, you can pack your bags and leave our house tonight. He stood there, arms crossed, his chest puffed out, waiting for my inevitable, crushing surrender. The entire party was frozen in time, a tableau of suburban justice. In the deafening silence, I subtly met Mr. Sterling's gaze from across the lawn. I gave him the absolute smallest, almost imperceptible nod. Mr. Sterling set his plastic cup down on a patio table with a soft thud and began to walk forward. The show was finally about to begin. As Mr. Sterling moved, the crowd naturally parted for him. He walked with an easy, terrifying authority that instantly commanded the space. He stopped right beside my father, who looked at him with intense annoyance, clearly irritated by the interruption to his grand, victorious performance. "Arthur, isn't it, Mr. Sterling said, his voice calm, smooth, but carrying effortlessly across the dead silent yard. "My name is Marcus Sterling. I think there has been a very slight misunderstanding about Caleb's financial situation." My father scowled deeply, his face reddening. "I'm sorry, who the hell are you? This is a private family matter." "Ordinarily, it would be, Mr. Sterling replied smoothly, not breaking eye contact. "But when it involves one of my company's most valuable assets, I feel incredibly compelled to clarify the record." He turned his body slightly to face the stunned crowd. "You see, Arthur is absolutely right that Caleb has done well for himself. But he has his facts completely wrong. Caleb doesn't have a tech job, with a great new salary." A few confused, hushed murmurs started. My parents exchanged a rapid look of total disbelief. Mr. Sterling continued, his voice gaining strength and iron. "He isn't just an employee, he is the co-founder and chief architect of his own company, NexusFlow AI. He is a visionary. And his little computer project, as I've heard it called here today, is actually a revolutionary piece of logistics software that my company, Apex Systems, is currently in the final stages of acquiring." He let that sink in for a heavy moment before delivering the final, devastating, world-shattering blow. "We are finalizing the legal papers on Monday morning. The acquisition price for NexusFlow AI, the company your son built from scratch in a freezing garage, is $8.5 million. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a silence so profound, so heavy, you could hear the distant hum of a lawnmower 3 streets over. $8.5 million. The number hung in the humid air, seeming to physically shimmer in the afternoon sun. I watched my father's face. The smug, righteous anger drained away in a millisecond, replaced by a slack-jawed, completely vacant stare. His skin went from ruddy red to a pale, sickly, terrifying gray. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with total, unadulterated shock. Mason looked as if he had been physically struck in the stomach with a baseball bat, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish out of water. Mr. Sterling wasn't finished. He walked over to me and put a firm hand on my shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that was also a massive, clear alignment of corporate power. "We at Apex are not just buying a piece of software, we are aggressively investing in elite talent, and Caleb is one of the brightest young talents I have ever encountered. We consider it a massive privilege to be in business with him." He then looked directly back at my father, his friendly demeanor completely gone, replaced by a steely, ruthless coldness that sent shivers down my spine. "So, you will have to forgive me if I find it absolutely baffling that you'd be willing to throw away a relationship with a man of his incredible character and caliber over a petty, pathetic $12,000 debt. Frankly, sir, your monumental loss is my massive gain." The spell was violently broken. The backyard erupted in an absolute cacophony of frantic whispers and gasps. The narrative had been utterly shattered into a million pieces. I was no longer the ungrateful, selfish son. I was the secret millionaire, the hidden genius, and my parents were the absolute fools who had just tried to publicly disown their winning lottery ticket over pennies. The looks on the faces of my relatives had shifted rapidly from pity for my parents to a stunned, horrified pity for me. They finally saw it. They saw it all. The years of neglect, the blatant favoritism, the shocking injustice. It was all laid bare in the smoking wreckage of my parents' greed. This was the exact moment everything changed. The moment I finally took back control of my own life. The party disintegrated with record, embarrassing speed. People made incredibly awkward excuses, avoiding eye contact, and slipped out the side gate, desperate not to be caught in the radioactive fallout of the explosion they had just witnessed. They couldn't look my parents in the eye. Within 20 minutes, the only people left in the trashed backyard were me, my parents, Mason, and Mr. Sterling, who had stayed by my side like a highly paid, silent bodyguard. Once the very last guest had scurried away, the silence was replaced by a desperate, clumsy, pathetic attempt at damage control. "Caleb," my mother whispered, taking a very shaky step toward me. Her face was a total mess of confusion, panic, and smeared mascara. The performative tears from before were now very, very real. Caleb, honey, we didn't understand. We had no idea. Oh, I think you understood perfectly, I said, my voice completely devoid of any emotion. I felt utterly hollowed out, but in a good way. Clean. You understood that you had a massive problem named Mason, and you thought you had a free solution named Caleb. The only thing you didn't understand was the actual number. My father, having somehow regained a tiny fraction of his color, tried to assert his dominance one last, pathetic time, but it came out as a weak, trembling imitation of his earlier bluster. Now, hold on just a minute. This is still a private family matter. We can talk about this inside like adults. Mr. Sterling, thank you for your clarification, but we can handle it from here. Mr. Sterling just raised a single eyebrow and looked at me, leaving the absolute power in my hands. There is absolutely nothing left to talk about, I said, looking directly into my father's terrified eyes. You gave me an ultimatum. You said, in front of everyone, either I pay Mason's debt, or I am out of the family. Well, I'm not paying. We didn't mean it like that, my mother wailed, reaching out for my arm. I stepped back, avoiding her touch. You're our son. We were just trying to teach you a lesson about family responsibility. No, I said, the word sharp, final, and cutting like a knife. You taught me my lesson about family a long, long time ago. You taught me that your love is highly conditional. You taught me that my worth is entirely tied to my utility. And today, you just taught me that the only time you see me as your actual son is when you think you can extract something from me. Mason, who had been completely paralyzed until now, finally spoke. His voice was a pathetic, desperate whine. Bro, come on. It's me, your brother. Are you really going to let this ruin everything between us? I slowly turned to him, and for the very first time, I think he really saw the absolute stranger I had become. The endless well of patience I had for him was bone dry. Ruin what, Mason? There is nothing left to ruin. You made your choices. They made theirs. Now I am making mine. I turned back to my parents one last time. You wanted me out of the house. You have your wish. I'll be gone in 5 minutes. I gave a final nod of immense gratitude to Mr. Sterling. Thank you for coming, Marcus. Anytime, Caleb. See you Monday, he said, shaking my hand firmly, a genuine smile returning to his face. Then I turned my back on them. I walked towards the house, leaving the three of them standing there amidst the debris of their ruined party, the half-eaten potato salad, and their completely shattered expectations. I didn't look back. Walking into the house felt radically different. It was no longer my home, or even a place I was temporarily staying. It was just a building. A set of walls filled with cheap furniture and toxic memories that no longer belonged to me. I went straight to my room, grabbed my laptop bag, and walked out the front door. I already had the box of my precious memories safely in my trunk. I got into my car, started the engine, and drove away. As I watched the house shrink in my rearview mirror, I expected to feel grief, or anger, or even triumphant glee, but I didn't. I just felt incredibly, wonderfully light. Update 2. It has been a little over a year since the barbecue. The year that followed was an absolute blur of intense activity, but it was the best kind of chaos. The massive acquisition by Apex Systems went through flawlessly on that Monday morning. Suddenly, Eli and I were not just struggling founders eating ramen, we were division heads within a major global corporation, armed with the immense resources and support to scale NexusFlow AI far beyond our wildest dreams. The work was incredibly demanding, requiring 80-hour weeks, but it was fulfilling in a way I had never known. Every single success was ours, built entirely on our merit, our brains, and our sweat, not on toxic manipulation or forced family ties. With extreme financial security came a radically different kind of freedom. The very first thing I did after the check cleared was buy a beautiful, modern penthouse condo downtown. It was a clean, minimalist space with massive floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the glittering city skyline. The first night I spent there, I slept on a cheap air mattress on the hardwood floor because I hadn't had time to buy any furniture yet. Looking out at the city lights, eating takeout pizza with Eli, I felt more at home than I ever had in my entire 24 years in my parents' house. This space was mine. I had bled for it, and I had earned it. I slowly started to build a real life. I bought actual furniture. I learned to cook proper, healthy meals instead of just surviving. I reconnected with old college friends and made new ones at work. My family became the people who actually showed up for me. Eli and his loud, wonderful family, who absolutely insisted I come over for Sunday dinner every single week. My dedicated team at work, a group of brilliant, hilarious people who shared my intense passion. I also started aggressively investing in myself, not just financially, but emotionally. I started seeing a trauma therapist, Dr. Hayes, to unpack the massive, tangled knot of years of emotional neglect. It was incredibly hard, exhausting work, digging through the deep layers of hurt, rejection, and suppressed anger, but it was vital. She helped me understand a crucial truth: the desperate need my parents had for Mason's success, and their cold indifference to mine, wasn't actually about me or him, it was entirely about them. It was about their own massive insecurities and their desperate need for a reflection they could be proud of to show the neighbors. Mason was a mirror reflecting what they wanted to see. I was a window showing them a world of hard work and quiet dedication they simply didn't understand and felt threatened by. I found intense joy in small, normal things. I joined a weekend hiking club and spent my Saturdays exploring the rugged mountains outside the city, breathing in the clean air. I adopted a rescue dog, a goofy, scruffy golden retriever mix I named Barnaby, whose unconditional, overflowing affection was a daily healing balm on my old emotional wounds. My life wasn't perfect, but it was profoundly authentic. It was a life I was actively choosing and building every single day. Then, 2 weeks ago, something happened that completely threw me for a loop. I was sitting in my new corner office, looking out at the panoramic view that still felt surreal, when my assistant buzzed me. "Caleb, there's a package for you. It looks like it's been forwarded from an incredibly old address." A few minutes later, she brought in a dusty, yellowed shoebox. My old childhood address was crossed out on it, with my new corporate address stamped over it. My name was written on the cardboard in my grandmother's familiar, shaky cursive. It was postmarked over 2.5 years ago, but had clearly been completely lost in the labyrinth of the postal system, sitting in a dead-letter office until someone finally tracked me down. My heart skipped a heavy beat. It was a package from her, sent shortly before she passed away. With trembling hands, I cut the tape and opened it. Inside the box were old, faded photographs, a small leather-bound journal that had belonged to my grandfather, and nestled among them, a sealed letter addressed directly to me. I carefully unfolded the brittle paper and began to read. It was a long, beautiful letter full of her usual immense warmth and wisdom, but one specific paragraph stood out, and it hit me with the sheer force of a physical blow to the chest. "I worry about your father," she wrote, her handwriting dipping. "I know he is incredibly hard on you, Caleb. Please try to understand, though you absolutely do not have to forgive him. His own father, your grandfather, was a very cold, demanding, and cruel man. He saw Arthur not as a beloved son, but as a massive disappointment. All his praise, all his affection, and all his money went to his younger brother, your Uncle Vance. Arthur spent his entire life desperately trying to win a love that was never going to be offered freely. I see him doing the exact same thing to you, repeating a toxic cycle of pain he doesn't even know he's trapped in. He's trying to get from Mason the exact validation his father never, ever gave him. It's not an excuse for how he treats you, my dear boy, but it is a reason." I sat there in my plush leather chair, completely stunned. My father, the absolute tyrant, the unmovable, terrifying force of my childhood, was once just a broken, desperate boy craving his own father's approval. He had been the original Caleb. And instead of going to therapy and breaking the cycle, he had perpetuated it, passing the deep, festering wound down to me, while propping Mason up as his Uncle Vance. It didn't excuse a single thing he did. It didn't erase the 2 decades of profound neglect, the stolen childhood, or the absolute cruelty of that final day at the barbecue, but it cast his horrific actions in a new, deeply tragic light. He wasn't just a cartoon monster. He was a deeply flawed man completely trapped in a psychological prison of his own past, and he had tried to lock me in that dark cell with him. This knowledge settled heavily in my chest, not as forgiveness, but as a kind of sad, final understanding. This could have been my fate, a legacy of pain passed on forever, but I had broken it. As if the universe had a sixth sense of dramatic timing, an email popped up on my computer screen not an hour later. The subject line was "Request for Dialogue." It was from a doctor, Hayes, no relation to my therapist, but a licensed family counselor. "Dear Mr. Caleb," the email began, "I am writing on behalf of my clients, Arthur, Diane, and Mason. They have been in intensive family therapy for the past 6 months. They have expressed a deep, genuine desire to open a line of communication with you in a mediated, safe environment, to take full responsibility for their past actions and to express their profound remorse. They understand and respect that the decision to engage is entirely yours. Should you be open to it, please let me know." I stared at the glowing monitor, my grandmother's brittle letter in one hand, the email in front of me, the past and the future colliding in a single, quiet moment in my office. My father's tragic history explaining his terrible actions. An email offering a potential, highly complicated path forward. For a year, I had felt nothing but the clean, simple, wonderful relief of being completely free. I was the victor, they were the defeated villains. Now, a new, far more complicated feeling began to surface. I sat in my penthouse that evening, the city lights twinkling below like a fallen constellation. Barnaby was asleep at my feet, his gentle snores a comforting rhythm. I thought about what a meeting would actually look like. I pictured the 3 of them sitting rigidly in a sterile therapist's office, their faces etched with rehearsed remorse. I imagined the tearful apologies, the excuses wrapped in modern therapeutic language. Would it be genuine? Or was it just another highly calculated strategy, a last-ditch effort to get back into the good graces of the son who was now an $8 million success story? Maybe their primary motivation was the painful realization that they had completely alienated their only actual retirement plan. Then I imagined a different, incredibly slim possibility. The possibility that their entire world shattering so completely and publicly on that Saturday had forced a genuine, painful, ego-destroying reckoning. The possibility that permanently losing me had finally made them see exactly what they had done. People could change, couldn't they? I sat with that thought for a long time. And then, I realized something incredibly profound. My freedom wasn't just about physically leaving them behind or having money. True freedom was about having the absolute power of choice. The choice to engage, or the choice to walk away forever, based entirely not on reactive anger or deep hurt, but on my own terms, for my own ultimate well-being. The power was no longer theirs to wield over me, it was mine. I looked at the email, then down at Barnaby, and finally out at the sprawling, beautiful city that I now called home. I didn't owe them my presence. I didn't owe them my forgiveness just because they finally realized they were wrong after it cost them everything. The boy in the faded photograph was finally in absolute control. He was no longer shivering on the edge of the frame. He was the one holding the camera. I moved my hand to the keyboard, opened a reply window, and began to type my final response. Dr. Hayes, I appreciate that your clients are seeking help, and I genuinely hope they find peace. However, I have built a peaceful, fulfilling life for myself, and I do not wish to reopen closed doors or revisit the past. I decline the invitation for mediation. Please inform your clients that I wish them well, but I request that they do not contact me again. I hit send. I closed the laptop with a satisfying click. I grabbed Barnaby's leash, and we walked out into the cool evening air, leaving the ghosts of the past exactly where they belonged, behind me.